My name is Craig Picken. I'm an executive recruiter. More than a decade ago, I started my practice for one purpose: to use my experience as a former military aviator, business jet sales executive, and P&L leader to help aviation and aerospace companies and their executives be fast, adaptable, and strategic. I do these podcasts to inspire and inform, but more importantly, they are a focused platform to help business leaders grow. Welcome to the Aerospace Executive Podcast. So welcome back to the Aerospace Executive Podcast. I am welcoming back Michael Alan Tate. Mike has been on with me, was on here on the show a couple of months ago. Mike is the author of Rolling Up Your Sleeve, the book Roll Up Your Sleeves, Living in a World of Constant Change. For the past 20 years, he's worked with boards, successful entrepreneurs, business executives, tech entrepreneurs, and a wide range of clients, and helps them with he's a great career coach and a business strategist. So, Mike, thanks for coming back on.
Thanks, Craig. I appreciate you being here. You know, I did that little podcast with you where you talked about the leaders in your life and got lots of great comments about the stories you told. So I appreciate it. So.
No, hey, it's great to have you back on as well. So I don't think this podcast could come at a more opportune time. You
Right.
talk about a world of change, and you talk about chaos and crisis that's happening, and it's exhausting. So
that's for sure.
What are you telling business executives now that are experiencing it?
Yeah. Well, several things. You know, one of the things you said about it's a timely. My book was actually supposed to come out in November, and the publisher called and pushed it up till now because of what's happened. We actually released it May 26th. But you know, one of the things I think that executives need to know is, and should have known this all their lives, is that there's a difference between change and transition. Change are the events that happen to us, and transitions, the emotions people go through. You know, as executives, we kind of get away and put our plans together about what to do and then come out and roll them out without thinking really we don't really have a plan for transition. It is helping people accept the change, accept that, understand they go through these emotions. And, because so that happens a whole lot.
Right.
And so I think that's something to consider, to step back and realize that everybody has a personality that's a little different, and they know that. But when you're in the midst of all this change, we don't really, in my little book, it says we kind of go out of our right minds when all this change happens, and we start acting out of our stress behaviors and not thinking about the people side of the transition side is the people side of what happens out there. So just remembering to have personality, and that during this time, what I found especially important is that people get role clarity. During change, role clarity is paramount. And now that we have half the people at home and half people in the office, how do you do all that? So those are a couple quick things I would talk with someone about as they're trying to move their team forward.
So you're talking about, let's just talk about, are we in a world of change right now, or are we in a are we just, changing a little bit in the short term, or are we in a full blown transition? A lot of people tell me, the work from home thing is permanent and they can get as much done from home. And I'm looking at it going, well, hey, look, you businesses think that everybody's productive, but quite frankly, with this COVID thing going on, only a third of the work is really getting done to begin with. Right. So you're really effective at a third of the work. Is it, are we really in a period of transition?
Yeah. Yeah. And most of the business I work with at this point, several have brought almost all their people back in because they wanted to come back in, and they do work better and they didn't have the productivity that you said was good, but it was I didn't realize it was a third of the work that they're doing. So I think it's already starting to come back in, and people are working back inside and realizing they need that kind of structure, because, we're all structure seeking beings, and we need that kind of structure around us in order to get our work done. And that's, putting that kind of thing in place where people know what the roles are, where they're going to be working, Because, but I do think it's opened up a lot of places I've worked with have realized some real efficiency gains because they weren't when they were out of their office. They understood, they had really wasted a lot of time and things that we weren't productive. They learned that some procedures and process they had in place didn't really have a reason to be there in the first place. So I think there's some real positive efficiencies to get from this, and then there will be times when you need to work at home. Now we know how to do it. So I just think there's some really positive things that come out of it. Yeah.
How does all this affect teamwork?
Oh, I think it's just reinvented teamwork. I mean, the places I've worked, I've just seen it teamwork get kind of go back to its norm. So we started out on Zoom calls, and everybody has their Zoom on and they're talking and doing that. About 2 meetings later, half the people have their Zoom call, have their pictures off. Now people are working and nobody's even visible anymore. And see, that kind of goes back to the way you at work, about a third of the people are checked out during the meeting. Anyway, not paying attention. I think the same dynamics work, but it's a lot easier to get away with it when they're not out. But but I've had the opportunity to work with several teams online using some engagement kind of activities and things where they've actually been able to solve some problems, put plans together. But it's just like, it is a little more difficult, but if a meeting needs an agenda, it needs a process, it needs ground rules. And that's the sort of thing that I see. If you don't have those things, you can't make it work at all. I think you really, and it's showing up in, because I have people, well, we don't need another meeting. And when I get on the meeting with them, we say, now here's our ground rules, here's how we're going to operate. All of a sudden they realize you can make this team stuff work. If you just take the principles of teamwork and put them to practice with this. And, but the social distancing and all that stuff, I don't, that's just, I don't know about that.
So talk to us more about, talk to us about your book. What's the, what are the points what are the points you're driving in your book? What's, roll up your sleeves, living in a world of constant change.
Right. Yeah. It's another parable, because I think people like parables, so you can get through them and learn some lessons in them. And it's actually a part kind of core around the story of the Exodus in the Bible, where the children of Israel leave and go to the promised land and wander through it. They were in a terrible place, but then when they left that and went into the wilderness, they were wandering. So we take that analogy and kind of come up with some principles that these young boys learn from their mentors. And there's 10 observations in the book, and the first one is change is not the same as transition. To remember that, and that personality matters, that role clarity counts. And one key thing in the book is that principles and purpose are extremely important. And when I talk to CEOs and other executives, I'll say, when your people come back in, remind them how important their job is. What is the purpose of their job? Rather than just getting through the motions of it. And what's your vision and your purpose for your organization? Hammer that home. But during change, people can't, as they say, a buddy of mine who was in Vietnam told me, and the Marines told me, it's hard to think long-term when the bullets are flying around your head.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that's the deal is, so what I am recommending, and I think, and I have seen it work, is let's have a 90-day vision. What's the one thing we're going to focus on together as a team for the next 90 days? Is what element, not a project in particular, but, is it getting more efficient? Is it being creative on this particular thing? Is it putting a new structure in place so we can rally? Because people need a rallying point when they're wandering through this transition phases of, transition. When it happens, everybody goes through shock and anger and blame and depression. And, then we call them the 3 phases of transition. One's resisting, the second one's exploring, the third one's committing. And everybody goes through those phases when a change happens. And as leaders, managers can make a decision to change or make a change happen, but leaders have to lead people through the emotions of getting back to their promised land, their new beginning, whatever. And that's what we're all struggling with. But you can't take people through their wilderness unless you have a promised land, something that they're going for.
They've got to have a goal. Basically, they have to have a goal or something that they're shooting for.
Something that they're shooting for. Yep.
Yeah, it's very hard to, let's just see. It's very hard to take people down a path when it's just, let's just see what happens.
Yeah, and that's just common sense. But, we've never had this type of situation to step into before. Nobody's ever led in this, when you've been out for 3 months because of a health issue and what people are dealing with. So, but going back to those kind of basic things, let's remember our values, let's remember our purpose, let's rally around an idea that'll get us through this. And, so those are some of the main points I share in the book. I give, examples of ways to do those sorts of things.
Yeah. It's interesting. You talk about your principles and purpose. I was thinking about it over the weekend, and you talk about a time where, and I think a lot of it is, the anger comes from being locked down for 3 months and a lot of uncertainty that we've thrown into people's lives, and the fact that people are scared about their careers, their jobs, their livelihoods. So there's a lot of anger out there right now, and it's manifesting itself in the form of social change, transition. And I was thinking over the weekend, it's a great time. If I was a CEO leading a good organization, and I sort of wrote my own mission statement down over the weekend, but if I was a CEO of an organization, I think I would start to write down some mission statements. And the mission statement is, what are we going to be as an organization? How are we going to deal? What are we going to be to our employees, our shareholders, the communities which we're in? And what are the social contracts that we need to have? I mean, like, you can't be everything to everybody.
Right.
And you're going to get criticism no matter, if you say it, you're going to get criticism from somewhere. You just, it's going to be the way, but at least you put it out there and you say, this is who we are, this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to treat people. And it's written, and we're going to live up to it. And anytime somebody objects, you say, hey, look, it's here. It's here. Is that a little bit about the direction
that's what I'm talking about. In some, and having, I've had one CEO who was kind of literary minded a little more than others. He wrote out, this is what it'll look like. This is how people will talk to each other in the future. This is what the kind of way we'll do work. All those, as vivid a vision as you can have, the better. And it's good to have that bigger vision, but it's also good to have that short-term goal, that 90-day thing that kind of gets, because you need some momentum going forward. And, but those principles are absolutely, and I think most organizations have value statements. It's a good time to look at those to find out if they're really what we believe. So
I think the best way to create chaos is not communicate. I mean, you think about, if you don't communicate, I think about Amazon and New York. Amazon really, Jeff Bezos really didn't communicate well his goals for New York when he was talking about moving there, putting some offices there. And what could have been a really good thing, everybody got suspicious of because it was poorly communicated to. China and COVID. China could not have handled COVID worse if they tried. And now everybody's suspicious of them. Or you think about that. And I think we're just in a world of over communication is probably the best path to go down. More importance placed on communication above anything.
Right. Yeah. And because if you don't, when during change, people become information junkies. They need a fix. They need to get a hit, and if they don't have it, they'll make it up. They'll make it up, and that's what happens. But there is so much communication, and sometimes the more you communicate, the less you communicate. That is, you need a simple message, something that's real clear. This is what we're doing. These are the steps we'll be taking. These are our 3 steps we'll take. Something that's so easy for, as I say, a 10th grader to understand, that because they're hearing all this kind of stuff and they need something they feel is constant. And, in an organization, most organizations started with a original story. And whenever I work with places, I always say, let's go back to what was the original story for this place? Can we take that and kind of build on that and let people see there's a real constant thing we're going after that's important for everyone? So, absolutely. And email is not communication, by the way. So.
Email drives me crazy. Text and email.
Yeah.
How many arguments have been started on Twitter?
Right.
Or email?
Sure.
How many businesses have been blown up by a reply all?
The purpose of email is just to transfer information, not to solve relationship problems. That's the kind of the.
In respect to my HR friends, it's a unique HR. I get emails from HR people.
Yeah.
Urgent. We need this in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
If it's urgent, the little, I keep trying to communicate. There's little phones on the little buttons on your phone.
Yeah.
They're there for a purpose.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. If you want to get in touch with me, give me a call. But but there's the whole thing about the different generations out there and how they communicate too. You Craig, you know that, because my daughter-in-law said, "Well, I didn't look at it because it wasn't important enough to send a text." And I'm going, "What?" So if it was important, she would get a text on it. So, anyway,
how do you teach a CEO though? I mean, look, now we're going on a real issue. How do you teach a 55 to 60-year-old CEO to communicate with 25 to 30-year-old employees who are professional? They're coming up through the ranks,
Yep.
And the CEO says, if I want something, I'm going to call them. And the employee says, well, I didn't think it was important enough because you didn't
text.
Send me a text. Now, who needs to change here?
Yeah. Well, maybe both, but there is one thing that I know I don't know a lot, Craig, but I do know something that's true. People communicate, the great communicators use 2 things, symbols and stories. Yeah. And everybody gets symbols and stories. In my book, there's a lot of things I draw, and I draw because symbols and stories make all the difference. I mean, like if somebody got up to, I coach CEOs a lot on how to illustrate a simple drawing on a board. Draw a triangle, draw 3 circles, draw something, and write. And people remember those symbols, but they remember, so you can communicate with that in a simple way. I mean, you should have a story of a value you're trying to project and tell that story until you're so sick of it for 6 months. Tell that story about, I don't know, the little red hen. I don't know what it is, parable. I mean, those are actually better. That reminds people of a core principle, because emails, all that's the 2 things. Leaders are masters of symbols and stories. You think so we really need to think about this now with all this other stuff going around. How can we simplify communication in such a way that people can get it? And if I had to say 2 things, it would be that.
Well, I think if you're a leader or somebody coming through, somebody coming through a transition, what's your story? Yeah. People learn more from, tell me your story. It's not read your resume. It's not tell me about the job you did. What's your story?
Yeah.
Tell me about your background. How'd you grow up? What was your best success? What was your biggest failure?
Yeah.
What drives you?
Sure.
And you're right. That storytelling is amazingly powerful, but I fear with text and email, the ability, people's ability to tell stories
Yeah.
is
But
diminishing.
but you can do a video and tell a story.
Mhm.
And you can do a video and do that. And you bring up another point, and that was that, to me, all great leaders are great listeners. And, I actually have a list of questions I put out there. When people come back, how do you handle it? Well, you need to ask them, like, how do you feel about what happened? How do you think we handled it? Could we handle it better? And it kind of gets people started. Then you start asking them, then you start asking about what was helpful. What during this time, here's one question I ask every person I get on the phone. During this time of transition, what's been positive and what's been hard? And I've asked that to 5 or 6 CEOs, and it's 30 minutes later, and they're telling me what was good and what was hard. And I say, now, you want to get your team together, go ask every one of your direct reports that question. You've now earned the right to be heard. So I know those are real soft kind of things, but that I remember the guy that somebody called me and asked me that question. I didn't come up with it, of course. I'm not that smart. But somebody asked me that, and I thought, man, and as I call, I say, if you want to get your team back together, ask each one that question and sit and listen to it. Don't try to fix them, just kind of listen to it. And that's a hard thing for a type A person to do, which most are. But if you want to have a healthy workplace, a healthy family, a healthy marriage, those 2 questions might be probably the 2 best ones to be talking about right now with everybody. So to get people ready to hear the message, the story, and the symbol you want to share with them.
So what are you telling people who may be displaced? They're now in both a period of change and transition. Both.
You mean they've lost their job because of this?
They've lost their job. They're transitioning to something new. The times we're in now are, chaotic at best.
Right. Yeah.
How do you tell people? You talk about, the 3 things, reflect, explore, communicate.
Mm-hmm.
How do they start to accept the change and get some traction in their transition?
Yeah, well, up until I've seen a shift out there. I think it's at almost like this week and the last week. It's just people have for 2 months nobody talked to anybody much about hiring anyone, as
Mm-hmm.
from your work, and now people are getting back to realizing we're going to have to live with this, so they're a little bit more receptive. But I mean, it's just like I guess back to my little book, The White Shirt, you need to have a personal plan for what you really want, so that you're real clear on it, because, if you're out of a work and you're trying to find something new, be clear on it. But even if you're working, the whole
Mm-hmm.
organization's just shifted, and the guy with the plan wins.
Right.
The guy with the plan who's took his time to say, now, if I could do something else inside or outside this company, what would it look like? Not a job title, but I'd spend my time doing this and that. I'd invest in this, I'd invest in that.
Mm-hmm.
Having that plan, so when you're in that room and everybody's in chaos and they don't know what's going to happen next, you can say, oh, by the way, I've thought about this idea.
Mm-hmm.
And when the guy with the plan always wins.
Right.
So how I am about, I don't believe, in job search, I know you need a resume, but job search inside or outside, you just need to have sat down and laid out what you want.
Right.
That would be my advice, because in all this change, you got to have something that's constant out there.
Yeah, I think about what's funny. I think about my brother. My brother got up one day and he just quit. He was running a TV station, and he walked in and handed his resignation.
Yeah.
And said, I'm done. And nothing on the back end.
Yeah.
But and it was hard because he had no plan. He didn't know what he wanted. He just knew it wasn't
Yeah.
what he had.
Right.
But what was funny is he started to put a plan together, and then he started to figure out what he was looking for.
Yeah.
And he realized what he's good at.
Mhm.
And sometimes we have conversations, and he just absolutely amazes me. And he started a business,
Mhm.
and it was tough to start, but now he's doing really well. And
Yeah.
it's kind of fun to see him get some
Mm. Yeah.
traction.
Sure.
But it was once he said, okay, this is the path I'm going down, and he
Right.
committed to that path.
Yeah.
Um, it's kind of the ultimate. If you don't know where if you don't know what you're looking for or where you're going, you'll probably, you'll probably never find it. Is
Yeah.
that
That's right. Yeah. It's all so simple, but also hard to do, especially when you're midst, like your brother was in the midst of that, a place that's probably sucking the life out of him, so he couldn't even think.
right?
And that's the thing about transition. Even now, you have to have an ending before you can have a beginning. And
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the principles in the book to remember. I'm talking to companies right now that are coming back in, and I'm saying, so when are you going to have an ending so y'all can start over again? Years and years ago, I used to work in outplacement where companies downsized and all that stuff. And I had a
Mm-hmm.
Canadian company I worked with one time who, it was really bad after the company had downsized. Everybody was just depressed. Half their friends were gone. And they said, we got to go forward. So we literally said, on Friday, we'll no longer talk about the past company. We're going to start anew. They actually took their policy books and manuals. We took them to the backyard, out in the back, and burned them.
Yep.
I mean, you hear about that, but I was there and I saw it happen. And then we said, so what's the future going to look like?
Mm-hmm.
What's it going to sound like? What are you going to hear people saying they're not saying now? What are you going to see people doing they're not doing now? They're Canadians. So anyway, and we painted that picture for them. And and in this time, I'm talking to companies now about having an official ending. So you can say, we have learned this so far. Now let's put that behind us and let's go forward. Because if you don't, you keep dragging that stuff along. And I don't mean, I'm not sound like a counselor, but I mean, that's just a principle of an ending kind of, if you know
Right.
anything about the Exodus story, they left Egypt. The guys were after them. They crossed the Red Sea. It went over, burned the bridges. That was their ending.
Mm-hmm.
So that model of having an ending so you can have a fresh start is very important. Yeah.
It's a little like Cortez when he burned the ships.
That's right.
You know,
Yeah.
there's your ending, guys. We're not going home.
That's right. Yeah. Yep.
Let's pick a direction, because we can't go east.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pick one of the other three, and that's where we're going. So
What it is. Yeah.
um,
Yeah. So that so that's a new, oh man, that's just so different for people to get their heads around in organizations, that human side's even more critical now than ever. And how do you lead people if you've never been through this sort of thing before?
well, I think so I'm very the Aerospace Executive Podcast, aviation, airlines. It's
Oh gosh.
if I'm
Wow.
an airline CEO, what am I probably doing? I'm probably taking the playbook, and I'm probably throwing it out, because
Yeah.
what it looks like when we all come back, will be very different. And
Yeah.
it might be, hey, look, get my strategic team together and say, we may have to become a low cost carrier, ultra low cost carrier. What's it going to look like if we have to become an ultra low cost carrier?
Right.
We may have to become a domestic only airline. All the international travel may stop. What's it going to be? What's it going to look like if?
Yeah.
And then there might be phase 3, and you get your teams together. Okay, this is what we have to do for this bucket. This is what we have to do for this bucket, and this is what we have to do for this bucket.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that was 6 months ago is irrelevant, because those days are gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, may they come.
We were totally prepared for a world that no longer exists.
Right.
Yeah. So that's kind of, and to have that kind of conversation, even to explore those possibilities about, we could do this, we could do that, we could do that. Now, which one are we going to do? That's that kind of healthy conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Low cost. What are we going to do? Maybe maybe we're the highest cost, and we just, those kind of options. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
But those kind of conversations is really what kind of because to getting back to a healthy organization, is really what we're after. And the other thing I think people need during this time, whenever these kind of things hit, the first thing that goes out is all the development and training or company. That's the first thing that goes down. But all the studies show in years of doing outplacement where you downsize, we have found out that if you start increasing training during change, giving people, it could be learning, they get through it so much quicker. Because you can't worry and complain when you're learning something pretty soon.
Right.
So get people, explore those ideas, have people start picking up some kind of new skill they want to learn. It doesn't cost a lot of money. We're talking about just having having a vision and have people, say, during this time, I've decided I'm going to improve my skills on organization, time management, or how I manage projects, or delegating better. Let's have one learning goal that we can all hold on to ourselves to get ourselves through this so we can think. But yeah, great idea.
That's one thing I teach. Primarily, I do a lot of mentoring for college kids, and I talk to a lot of transitioning military people, but I think it's very relevant even for employed executives and professionals. Yeah. Meet somebody new every week and ask them, what is it you do? Tell me about what you do. What's your story?
Yeah.
And, it's amazing, what you learn, how many new conversations are created, how many new job opportunities and how many new doors are opened up, all because you took an interest in somebody else and saying, what is it you do?
Yeah. Tell me.
And, I love doing that. And people are always, they're thrilled to tell you. So
they are. Yeah. It, like when, I always tell people, that everybody has a story to tell, and we never get tired of giving other people advice either. I mean, when somebody comes to us and asks for advice, it seldom ever happens. And so I encourage people, like, if you're trying to find a job, don't just go out and ask people to tell their story, and they'll lead you to something. Don't ever ask them about a job. I mean, just ask them, show interest in them. And there's nothing as, we seldom get listened to anymore.
No, I hear you.
Yeah.
So Roll Up Your Sleeves is your book. When's it coming out?
It was released on May 26th.
May 26th.
So it's out there now. It's out in Kindle and softback. It'll be Audible in about a month. But it's out there online, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, everywhere. It's actually, this week we ran a special for Kindles. I've got a special Kindle price, I think $3 for a Kindle book.
Okay.
So we're doing a promotion this week. So if you want to go out there and look at the rollupyoursleeves.com, and we'll have all that, of course, in the show notes. But take a look at it and download one. And I have several companies that are buying them for their people to read through, and then they talk about the 10 principles in the back as a kind of a group. It's a good way to get people kind of started. People need to read something, learn something new. And this book is a 93-minute read. We would call it an airplane book before, when we were on airplanes. But it's a quick read. It's interesting. It's a parable. It's a lot of fun, and kind of common sense ways to experience.
But those are the best kind. It's 93 minutes. It's impacting. It's 93 minutes.
Yeah, stories and symbols.
Stories and symbols. Very good.
Yeah.
So, Mike, thanks for coming on. Once again, Michael Alan Tate, Roll Up Your Sleeves, Living in a World of Constant Change is the book. And thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Craig. So good to see you again. Appreciate it, man.
You too.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed the latest edition of the Aerospace Executive Podcast. You can reach out to me directly, Craig at northstaresg.com, or check us out at www.northstaresg.com. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, or on YouTube. Just do a search for Aerospace Executive Podcast. Thanks again. I'm Craig Piven.